It is such an honor to be here amongst my friends, and so many of you have been involved in Parks and Recreation over the years, and that's what makes this job fun. And so be kind, remember that today. So thank you for the nice introduction, and anytime anybody says, can you come talk about Parks and Recreation, you know how passionate I am about that. So I will take every opportunity I can to share with you what we have going on, what we are going to do next, and where we've been is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, but as they say, sometimes you can't tell where you need to go until you've looked at where you've been. So I'm going to give you a quick run through a little bit about Parks and Recreation, our history. The early years of Parks and Recreation in Kingsport, there was a golf course over where Memorial Gardens and that area is, across from the Civic. Some of you may or may not have known that. You can see that. There was the early swimming pool, which was built by the American Legion. That's why it was called Legion Swimming Pool, and donated to the city in the 30s, was built. Civic Auditorium, as Gail said, still such a fabulous facility for our community, and has served so many capacities over the years in as far as providing a service to this community and places for people to go to do things, whether it's a book sale now or COVID-19 shots that we're doing. In the early years, it was the party place to be. And you had a ham radio office downstairs, and your first central dispatch for Kingsport, not the very first, but an early dispatch, was in the basement of Civic Auditorium. So think about that. Elvis was even at the Civic. You hear that rumor? It is true. There is proof positive that Elvis was in the building. A lot of programs were held and are still being held in the Civic Auditorium over many decades of lots of variety of things that went on there. Here's an interesting picture, a postcard I actually found at a postcard museum in Ohio. And it shows sort of that depiction of what the Legion Pool looked like, Civic Auditorium, and look in the background, you see the early beginnings of building Dobbins-Bennett High School. In the early years, we also acquired Allendale Mansion, thankfully to a great gift by the Harvey Brooks family. It was given to the city and bequeathed at his death. It was 20-something acres, and what we call the White House of Kingsport, because it does look a lot like the White House. The first Parks and Recreation director was Mr. Mack, as many called him. I had the privilege of knowing his son, Hal McCorris, who worked at Eastman Parks and Recreation, and also met his wife, and I've heard wonderful, great tales. In fact, a lady came in to get her COVID shot just last week, and she came in and said, I want you to know I worked here as a secretary while I was in high school, and she worked under Mr. Mack. So I got to hear some additional stories about Mr. McCorris. And if you look at the bottom of the things that were going on at that time, he set an incredible foundation for our community for Parks and Recreation, and we've been building on it ever since. So to give you another sort of a background of some of the things of what we look like over the years, here's what some of your parks and areas looked like in the 1970s. If you look at this number, and I want you to remember this for a little later when we go further in the presentation, this is a map to show you how far we've come. We all know in the digital world, I actually had to have someone hand draw that picture of a tree on this brochure because we didn't have the way to do the things we do now by computers. But 15 parks is what we had in the 1980s. We had lots of programs over the years, and here's some things you may not have known about Parks and Recreation. We used to actually have a competitive gymnastics team, and they practiced at the Civic Auditorium. We had lots of arts and cultural opportunities and theater. In the 1980s and early 90s, we tried to focus a lot on that cultural opportunity for our community and expanded our reach a little bit with some things like professional theater coming into our town, jazz at Allendale, and some other special programs. The 80s also looked like this as far as some of your facilities. We had some things we renovated, Heritage Park, which is now Domtar, which was also Weyerhaeuser, Willamette, and has changed names many times, but it's the same property. Cloud Park, we renovated in the 80s, and then we started adding things to our inventory. You had Cattails Golf Course, Hunter Wright Stadium, and we did the major renovation of the Kingsport Renaissance Center, which was at the time, people sort of referred to it as the old Sevier Center. The 90s, we had some more programming specialties that came along. We added the Hunter Wright Baseball Classic with the Hokey Smokey, UT versus Virginia Tech. Some of you may have been there at our grand opening. If you look at this tennis classic thing in the middle, if you read it closely, if you remember, one of our aldermen was Bob Petrie, and he and Sarah Lou Ring, who was another alderman, actually participated in our tournament. You have the Legion swimming pool, we had swim meets there, and then we had what was called the Arts Enrichment Program, which was a one of a kind. We were actually an arts endowment group. We gave $100,000 to the community as grants. We were the granting agency for a while. We started things with Fun Fest. Fun Fest was already going, but we geared up a lot during the 90s. Who cannot remember a time when you were at a crazy boat race? Everybody in this room, I promise you, has either been in a boat, been in the river after you were in a boat, or been participating as far as along the banks. We started some of our programs like the Fun Fest One Pitch Tournament, which still goes on today and is very popular during Fun Fest. The 2000s, we started going into a building phase, and you got a lot of new facilities added to our inventory. So we have the splash pad, the first phase of the Veterans Memorial at J. Fred Johnson Park, Domtar Park, Eastman Park, which is our soccer fields, and the skate park at Cloud down the street. Allendale Mansion has been a great asset for us, but Friends of Allendale have been very involved in helping us expand the properties at Allendale. So you've got the Herondon, you have the amphitheater, which they raised the money for, and they're constantly giving back to the community. We've also done a lot of neighborhood park renovations, such as Ridgefields, and we acquired Linview from Sullivan County as an old school building in 2008. We had many programs. We started the sculpture walk and the sculpture programs downtown in 2000s, and then we changed the Hokey Smokey to be ETSU versus UT. We continue to build in our parks. We've added a lot of neighborhood parks in over the years, such as the Edinburgh Park and the Rotary Park in Rock Springs. Several of these were donated to us by the community associations or through the county. Then we added V.O. Dobbins as far as it was already there, but we renovated it in the 2000s, and we added a dog park. We're going to add another one to our community tomorrow, which is so exciting. But I would tell you, I think Mr. McCorse would have been scratching his head if he ever thought you'd have to put 3 acres around a bunch of fences for people to take their dogs. And that they would even be willing to pay for that. You know, they actually pay to get in. So things change as far as what your community wants and the culture and what's important. We added Brickyard Park just a couple of years ago, and we've added many things to the Veterans Monuments as far as 2 phases as well as a Gold Star Memorial and a Sentinel. A fabulous facility. If you've not been there, please do go visit. We continue to expand. Some of the recent additions have been improvements to Borden Park, one of your oldest parks. The first park in Kingsport. Who knows what the first city park was in Kingsport? J. Fred Johnson Park. It was called City Park up there by Dobbins Bennett. But Borden is equally almost as old. We've done renovations at Linview. We put over $1 million into renovations there. We opened Centennial Park downtown. And just recently we added the Miracle Field, which is going to open the first weekend of May with our first programs with our Challenger League. Another exciting opportunity for us. And all through this, and as Tom knows, the Greenbelt has been a part of our legacy and will continue to grow and expand over the years. And for the last 30 years, we've been building piece by piece to where now we're almost 11 miles of greenway, and it's just an amazing opportunity for us to share to the community the beauty of this region. Throughout all this, so there's always programs. It's not just the place you should go, it's the things you put in the places you have. So we have a variety of programs for all ages, all kinds of abilities, and they change and evolve over time with the needs and interests of our community. Again, cornhole was just basically beanbag toss when I was a kid, but now it's a popular sport. And disc golf is a new adventure that we didn't have many years ago. We've been featured in magazines and nationally recognized across the country. We've had a lot of awards. We've gotten millions of dollars in grants, and we've done a lot of wonderful ribbon cuttings to share with the community the success that we've had. The volunteers, these are just a few to name that have been recognized, but we could not do it without each of you that have volunteered your time, for the people that coach our leagues, for the people that go out and help with the cleanups that are coming up on our greenway system. Everybody that's contributed to our program, we say thank you for your assistance. And many of you also have helped with some of our projects too. To give you an idea of the overview of where we are now, remember that slide I showed you that said we had 15 city parks? Well, we have 27 just community parks and all these other things that are listed up there. I won't go through them, you can read them, but I think you will be able to have a better understanding of the impact that we make in the community and how grateful and thankful we are that we have these assets and we can serve in this capacity. We have a lot of people that enjoy themselves in Parks and Recreation. So now, where do we go from here? One of the things we've always done very well is create master plans for parks and projects. We've done a lot as far as being involved in the visiting processes throughout the community. We've done surveys, we do customer surveys all the time. But the one thing we had never completed until this last year was a comprehensive look at who we are, where we've been, and where we need to go. We've done them in small pieces, but we've never looked at it from a whole view. So the Board of Mayor and Aldermen funded this, and we're very thankful for the opportunity to look ahead and where do we go from here. So why do we do that? Well, we all have probably stories that we could talk about, things that happened in our past about Parks and Recreation someplace. It may not have been here. Something about being out in nature, or maybe being involved in a sports league, or something with the arts, or cultural opportunities, whatever it might have been that to you was a recreational moment that was special. Whether it be climbing a tree as a child, or maybe sitting and listening to an entertainment venue at Allendale. But the value of it is much better than what we sometimes assume. Think about the water quality, think about the air quality, think about those things that are environmentally an impact in our day-to-day lives. Parks and Recreation touches you in more ways than you probably ever imagined. And here's some information about that. So for our master planning process, the most important piece of it was to find out what you, the citizens, want and where you want us to go, what you want us to do with your parks and with your programs in the future. During the pandemic, we had a bit of a challenge of how to do that. We started this process right before things got really ugly as far as the COVID situation, so we had to be creative. We did some public input items at the Civic Auditorium to start with, then we went to the farmers market. We did something at Bays Mountain Brewery, again trying to figure out places where we could gather with people in a safe environment and ask their opinion. What do you want? What do you like? What have you done before? What do you want more of? What would you like to see different? And these are just some pictures of how we did some of that. Probably to me, one of the easiest things to share with you, if you don't go away with anything else, is to look at this one slide. When you ask people simply, tell me one word, what makes you think of Kingsport when it comes to Parks and Recreation? And that's what you see on the left. What's in the middle of that? Tom will be glad to know. It's the Greenbelt. When you ask people to describe their vision of Parks and Recreation, what is that one word? And if I were to ask you, you might have a different word, but most people can come up with one thing. So these are the primary things that came out of that conversation. I'm going to show you several slides now that have got a lot of data on them. Certainly I would not think that you could read all the stuff that's on there, but there's some highlights that I want to point out to you as we go through it. If you ever want to see the full master plan, it's about 200-something pages. I'll be more than glad to share it with you, but it's interesting reading, but a lot of reading. So when you ask people on the open houses, like I said, the public input, about what kinds of programs and things have they been involved in, what did they like, what would they like to see more of, and what kinds of things they enjoyed doing. If you read, I'll read you the top 5, which is the most important things, obviously. Hiking, greenways, walking trails, natural hiking trails, lacrosse, historic education, music and movies in the park, and mountain bike trails. Those are some of the top things that people said they were currently enjoying or they wanted to see more of. And one way we did that is the pictures on the right. It's very simple for people to pick something by visual reference versus asking them to interpret a question. So then we ask them as far as what do you really want to experience? It's one thing to say, here's what I do, but what are you getting out of it? What does that make you feel? What is that experience for you? And if you'll look the top things on that at the bottom, greenways were high, hiking trails, historic education. The experience they wanted was passive conservation for park, social entertainment, cultural and entertainment. So those are kind of those things of what are driving people to do the activities they currently are. To give you an idea, we had 800 something plus digital surveys that we did online, and we probably received about 1,000 other information as far as pamphlets and written surveys and feedback at the different input sessions, which was very high given the pandemic. So then you ask in another way, here's some pictures of things. So we asked people to identify their activities they wanted to be involved in. So what do you want to do? You've got that feeling of kind of those spaces and that experience. Are you starting to see a pattern that we got through most of this? Greenways, hiking trails, music, movies, kayaking, canoes, pocket parks, social spaces, and wildlife viewing. So then if we ask a very important question for our elected officials, if you were them, if you were one of the elected people, and you had to choose how to spend your money, it's one thing to ask somebody, what would you like to have? It's another thing to ask them, are you willing to pay for that? Or are you willing for your tax dollars to go toward that? What are your priorities? And so we asked people to consider those, and they said the top things they wanted to see was strengthen our downtown recreation, invest in the Greenbelt, improve recreation, and improve and expand nature-based recreation. So not only are people saying we like it, we want it, but we're willing to pay for it. One of the slides I don't have here in the information in the surveys was asking people, how would you be willing to fund this? And the majority of the people said they'd be willing to have tax increases or levies as far as some increases in fees, but they were willing to pay for the services they thought were important. If you look at the surveys we did, I don't think I could have crafted this better as far as having some equity within it. You have almost equal amount of male and female. You have a wide diversity of age, and then you have mostly your city residents. So it's one thing to ask someone that doesn't live in Kingsport, do you want to pay for it? It's another thing to ask people that actually live here, what are you willing to pay for? And this one, again, shows you a lot of the activities that we had that we gave people options on and what they chose as far as their top priorities. Same thing, natural areas, greenbelt, wildlife type stuff, running, walking. If you have something that's on the low priority, I want to make sure you understand, it doesn't mean it's a low priority, it just means it still got some votes, but it wasn't as high in the totals as those first three. Then we were asking people about the events and things they want to do. They like sports leagues, fitness is important to us, wellness, and Roger will be glad to hear that. Nature-based programs are also important. COVID-19. We saw an opportunity to ask people a different question that I never in my career thought I would be asking people, because we never thought we would have COVID and that we would be shut down. During the COVID situation, we tried to maintain spaces open as much as we could in a safe manner, but we did have to close many of our facilities. We had to rope off our playgrounds because we were afraid of what the consequences might be. But we saw an increase of people that were using our parks for that place to go that was safe, and a way to get out of the house and to have some sense of mental health and recuperation. People were flocking to the parks, to the point that some of your state parks had to close. There were too many people in them. We didn't have that situation, but we did see a lot of activity. I will say I saw some creative activity that I also could never imagine. It's the first time I've ever seen anybody with jet skis on the soccer fields when they flooded last spring. You know, it was a different way to recreate, what can I say? And so there were some things like that that people found. There was drag strip racing going on in our empty parking lot. So recreation is whatever you make at the time some days. But we did ask people, what do you think about recreation now that you've had to stay at home and you've been homeschooling and you've been confined? And overwhelmingly people said, if I didn't think it was important before, I certainly recognize now the value it is to me, my family, my health, and my well-being. We sometimes have to compare ourselves to others. We're not an island within our own. So part of the study went about comparing to our regional partners and looking at what they offer, what things they provide for services, how much they charge, about staffing levels. We also looked on a national level. And I would say in some places we stack up pretty equally. In some places we got some things we can work on. But we're very proud of what we have, and we think we're doing a really good job overall. But there's always things that we can do better and we can reach higher. So this map tells you some of the things that we found out about service delivery. If you look at Kingsport, and I showed you all those things that we offer as far as services, we offer a lot, but we may not be proportionally offering everything to the places that are growing and expanding our community. So if you look at this, if I can get the pointer to work. Where is it? Nope, it's not going to work on me. All right, try it. There we go. We have some areas. We are doing things in Lingard. Whoops, that's not the way I wanted to do. Go back. That was not the pointer I wanted. Okay, so why is it doing that? Sorry about that. So anyway, I won't try the pointer. The Lynn Garden area, we're working with the Lynn View Community Center, but we also have some gaps of services that we need to provide up there. If we ever renovate the entire building, that would help in some ways. But we've got some growth areas, such as Cooks Valley, that does not have a park, and there's nothing within a close distance to them to be able to go and use. You've got Rock Springs. We have a park in Edinburgh, and we have the old Rock Springs Elementary School, but they're very small, and they really don't serve the total needs of that community area based on population and the demographics. And then you've got Colonial Heights as another area. Somebody would say, well, you got Warriors Path. Well, that's true. Warriors Path is a great day use park, and it's a wonderful state park. It also is not within close walking distance or close proximity to most of the residents. You have to drive there. So we're trying to find things where people have a short distance to get to a neighborhood park. And these were some areas that we saw some gaps. This gives you a little bit clearer definition of where those areas are. You've got Lynn Garden, if you look at up near Roosevelt School, as we were talking about, in those spaces, and then the Cooks Valley area off of Memorial Boulevard. And if you look at this, again, it sort of just drills it down a little bit further on each of those spaces and where they fit in. So how do you fix that? One of the things we've looked at and was recommended by the consultants was we need to be always looking for opportunities as far as land that's available to create park spaces, because as we get more and more condensed in our housing and development, land is less available. But you also can work with developers and say, are there ways that you can help us while you're creating maybe a subdivision, that land could be set aside, or that you can help us create a park space that will increase the values of the properties that buy there. You can look at Edinburgh. Edinburgh is a wonderful example of a partnership. If it wasn't for the school and the fire department and the city services there, that development would probably not have prospered at the level that it has now. Greenbelt, like we said, is a very important component to our community and very popular feature for Parks and Recreation. So we looked at how can we expand that, and these are just some ideas. It's everything from possibly going down Riverport Road, connecting to the new Brickyard development that will be in place in the next couple of years, looking at the downtown spaces, looking at your west and east end. The sky's the limit. It's not always the easiest way to get there, but as Tom would probably attest, having been on the committee for years, sometimes what you do is you pick a piece, you pick another piece, you have a plan, you figure out how to connect them later. You don't always try to do it all at one time. It takes years to get there, but you figure out what the plan is, and then you incrementally try to work with that. We've also looked at blueways. A blueway is basically using the water as a trail system, whether it be for kayaking, canoes, or any kinds of river recreation along the side. We have the ability in Kingsport to do something no one else in this region has. We're the only city that has two rivers that converge, the North and the South Fork of the Holston, as well as many tributaries that contribute to that area. So why not take advantage of that and create a river experience either along the side? We have a lot of fishing, we have a lot of boats already, we have kayaking, and we have beautiful areas. The Greenbelt is most popular along the creek and along the river than any other sections. So we in Kingsport can take advantage of that and do something special. So in summary, if you do the elevator speech, as we would call it, here's some of the 12 big ideas that came out of that 200-something page document. And I'll let you read those, but they really boil down to a couple of things. One is, like we said, take those assets that we have that are unique. Take your river, take your greenways, take your beautiful mountain areas, take your nature and scenery that's making everybody want to move here, and accent that. How do you make that the best and preserve it at the same time? How do you create programs that enhance those areas and give people an opportunity to go out and enjoy those moments and experience it? How do you maintain it? We've got it. We can build a lot of things, but it really won't help a lot if we let it go and deteriorate to any degree. So we have to always be looking at maintenance and upkeep and how you do that. You have to look at your staffing levels and how do you have people to manage those facilities and keep them there. And then the other piece that really fits in, like with this club, is those partnerships. We always share partnerships, whether it's with the state grant or whether it's with civic clubs. If I haven't asked your club lately to be involved in building something or cleaning up something for me, I'm going to be back. And I know Pat knows that I'm always asking for people to help, and you always say yes. So we appreciate that, and those are the partnerships that make us whole. And also you have to look at those partnerships with your corporations. That's why you have a Domtar Park. That's why you have an Eastman Park at Horse Creek. the corporations have supported it. Roger's worked with us with several things with Ballard, and Wellmont's been involved. So those are the things that make us Kingsport who we are. And then you look at the money side of it. So for those of you that are statisticians or math people, don't start adding this up. I'll just tell you it's millions. It's a lot of millions, as a matter of fact. So it does take money to get there sometimes. But we can do it if we do it a little at a time. And a part of this proposal and the purpose of this plan is giving us that footprint, giving us that blueprint of how to plan it out over time. You can't buy it all at once. You can't do anything all at one time. We can't afford that. And we have other priorities in our community too. But we can make it happen. We'll look at grants, we'll look at partnerships, and then hopefully the city will also be able to find money to fund some of the things. So how do you get there? Another piece of the plan is to come up with some incremental steps. These are not set in stone. These are just guidelines to help us know ways we could go and what are some of the things that we could be doing and how to get there. It doesn't make any sense to offer a plan and just throw it out and say, there you go, have a good day, hope you can make it happen. So we wanted to carefully craft one that has a purpose, a vision, and a way to get there. And we've already started. We are already starting on to that implementation of this plan. It's not been formally adopted by the BMA yet, but we've already started working on it. So one of the things that was in there was about the Greenbelt. Our next phase of Greenbelt will be going west from the Rotherwood Bridge out toward the Allendale Mansion area. This is just sort of a visual reference of how and where it will go. That's not exact, but we are in the design phase of that at the moment. And I think, we're doing some things as far as the environmental studies. We should hopefully have a little bit better idea by this time next year about funding and time frame on construction. So that's one end. The other end of town, we're looking at a possible parking lot on the Cleek Road side where we've just finished a section. So on both ends of the Greenbelt, we're looking at some options. And I've had several inquiries lately about possible donation of land. So the Greenbelt is here, it's going to stay, and we're going to keep making it bigger and better for you. This is another opportunity for you to be involved, and don't even try to read all that. But there is an input process going on right now for a bike and ped plan through the Metropolitan Planning Organization. You have an opportunity to give your input into that. If you want more information, talk to me afterwards, and I'll give you the contact of how to do that. We're working with them to make sure that greenways, trails, bike, ped is all the same thing. Some of it may be along a road, some of it might be along the river, but we want to make sure that we are a walkable, rideable community, so we're working with them on that plan. The river, I talked about the river and being important. Well, on the north end of the river is Virginia. On the South Fork is our river, as we know it, at Riverfront Park. And we also have a new park we're building behind the Walmart on Fort Henry Drive called River Bend. It's at the base of the cliff. You probably don't even know it's there. It is an incredibly gorgeous piece of property, very private, very quiet, and I see the fishermen are not going to be happy when I build the park there because they've been hiding back there fishing, and it's their own little private jewel. But what we're going to be doing is at the very base of this, you'll see a small trail. That'll be our first phase. It will come in on the far end next to the dam, and it'll be a very short natural surface trail, and that'll be the first part. Then we'll have other phases going past there. We've been working on our neighborhood parks. I'm building a playground in Linview right now. Next year there will be a pickleball court and a basketball court up there. That is through a diabetes grant, so we're trying to continue with our neighborhood developments. We're just finishing up some improvements at Preston Forest Park and Borden Park through a grant, again, neighborhood development, which was a part of the plan. And we're going to be rebuilding the Scott Adams Skate Park because it's going to be disrupted in the current site when Don take credit for any of his success. But I will say I'm awfully glad that we were able to provide Blake a place to enjoy recreation and to get his start and to understand the value of that. I remember watching Blake run down the floor as a child, and he had these really heavy prosthetic legs. Sometimes they just fall off. He'd just sit down, put them back on, take off again. He was just part of the program like every other child. So that's why we do recreation, is to provide an opportunity for everyone to be involved. And then ultimately, this is what we're all after. All that paperwork and the master plans, it's just paper. But we're here to try to make a difference for today and tomorrow and make this world better for those that come behind us. Thank you for the time today, and we've got just a few minutes if there's any questions, and then